And we are live. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first episode of Modern Enterprise Architecture Meetup. And today's topic is Modern Enterprise Architecture from rigid to responsive. So, good afternoon to those of you in Australia and New Zealand, and good morning to our viewers in UK. Please make sure to introduce yourselves in the comments and let us know where you're watching us from. I'm Jana Martins, and I'm talent and community lead here at FromHereON, and I'll be your host for today. So today's discussion will cover some key topics. I'll just bring them up for you on the screen. We're going to talk about the definition and differences of modern enterprise architecture from traditional approaches, some significant changes over the past decades with some examples, real-life examples, benefits of adopting modern enterprise architecture in today's business environment, some challenges and strategies for implementation, and of course, some advice for enterprise architects to stay relevant and effective. Please join our discussions with your questions and comments, or at least, please say hi in the comments, because if you're saying hi at the comments, we know that you're here, that you're listening, and it's nice to know that someone's actually here and listening to us. So we plan to run these discussions monthly, and we'll announce upcoming topics later today. So our purpose is to create a space for architectural thinkers to connect and share the information. And our goal is to build an informal community where members can enjoy exploring diverse architectural ideas. So I think that's enough of me. I'm gonna, pass it all to our speakers. We have a lot of people saying hi. Adam's here, Daryl's here, Nitish here. So thank you so much, guys, for saying hi in the comments. We appreciate that you're here. And I'm gonna pass it to Pieter to introduce himself. Please, Pieter.
Thanks, Jana. Yeah, I'm from originally a technical insurance background from the business side. I've always enjoyed the automation and system side of things, and I actually swapped over to a more data design and software development side, and also spent a lot of time thereafter in business process reengineering and automation, and from early on in the career, and I ended up playing that bridge between business and IT ever since. So I've been formally doing enterprise architecture, probably less formally so, but no less, since 2007. Got a particular fondness for business and data architecture. I've been in Australia since 2013. I don't have an accent; everybody else does. But I worked in multiple industries, specifically in health and financial services, as well as a lot in government. I love problem solving. I hate being bored. So really, I love what I do.
Thank you, Pieter. Yeah, it will take me probably forever to get rid of my accent, but it is what it is. Over to David.
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. So I'm David White. I'm the executive director at FromHereON in Australia. I think like most enterprise architects, not many enterprise architects start off by being enterprise architects. We kind of wander through life, and eventually you end up being one. I started off as a developer, realized I was a terrible developer, even though I enjoyed it, and then found solution architecture that really resonated for me and had a lot of fun doing that. And then eventually stumbled upon enterprise architecture and really enjoyed that kind of really big view that it has of everything and really large, complex problems that it's trying to solve. But actually, one thing that stopped me from getting into it at that point was that it felt irrelevant in a lot of ways, like super relevant, but also the practice of it was irrelevant, which is why this topic's actually really, really important to me, or really resonates for me. There's how relevant can you be? But anyway, so yes, I've been in architecture for a long time, and really enjoy the style of architecture we do here at FromHereON, which is, that's me.
Thank you, David. We have a lot of people joining us today. Thank you, everyone who's saying hi in the comments. We really appreciate. We have people from New Zealand and Canberra and London, and even people from Paris. Here we go. So really have that international audience today. That's great to see everyone joining. Obviously, Hugh is here too, of course. So, guys, before we dive in, and I'll ask first question to our speakers, I'd love to hear from everyone who's listening now, or maybe watching the replay, and please maybe put in the comments what interests you about this topic. You know, what brought you here today? You know, what caught your attention? First question, obviously, to our speakers is, you know, what is modern enterprise architecture? And I don't know, what defines it, or how does it differ from traditional enterprise architecture approaches? And is it different? Like, what is enterprise modern enterprise architecture in your opinion? Pieter, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, modern moves on, you know, the definition of modern as we go. You know, modern in the 60s was modern for the time, but not so much anymore. But I don't think it's anything specifically new, but there are a couple of things that the way I think of it. Let's start maybe with traditional architecture. I think a lot of architecture traditionally was project-based, you know, probably primarily solution architecture, and maybe aspiring to be enterprise-wide and looking at at least all the IT across the organization fits together, and often producing reams of design artifacts that maybe aren't used, but it's what we said we would deliver. It's on the deliverables list, and we tick it off, and we get it done. Also, maybe an example with a university we recently worked with is where the architecture team had no access to business people, you know, and was only seen as IT, and you could speak to IT, but don't speak to the business, which, you know, is certainly not what I would consider modern. But in essence, it needs to be light touch. It needs to be good enough. I think it should consider outside in if possible. Be evidence-based and data-driven and responsive, but appropriate to the pace of the organization. It's no use running 1,000,000 miles an hour if your organization is just not that kind of organization. Something I learned early on, which might not be modern, but maybe it was just early for its time. It was like architecture needs to be good, as in it needs to be recognized by other architects as being, you know, of a good quality. It needs to be right in that it needs to be correct and not wrong. But importantly, it needs to be successful. And therein lies the secret sauce. It's not one thing, but it needs to be appropriate to your context, and you need to be flexible and not, you know, use the same big hammer to hit every nail. So, in a nutshell.
David, what is modern enterprise architecture for you? Like, is it you know, the term that widely used? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, look, I it's a bit of a loaded term. I agree a lot though with what Pieter was saying. That's a similar experience. I think back to, you know, that I kind of referenced it early on, that at the beginning, that experience I had. I was working in a large public sector agency, and the enterprise architecture function was definitely trying to do the right thing, but it was doing it in a way that seemed irrelevant and producing, like Pieter said, reams of architecture documentation that just seemed, as someone working in program and solution, just seemed like it's irrelevant, and I didn't know what value it was producing, even though I could see when I spoke to them what they were trying to do in terms of joining up and have a, you know, a joined up view of how the whole organization should work. So I think that really kind of exemplified for me this thing between the traditional and the modern, or and that's about in the modern way is well, if the old way was about, you know, exerting control and authority and being formal and prescriptive, and, you know, that's that rigid kind of sense, where you document things and then it's done. That the, you know, architecture team is separate to the business or separate to the projects and kind of sits in its ivory tower, and it's a little bit of a caricature, but a lot of it is true. Like, it comes from something. Whereas the modern architecture, and you could use just like a small m for modern, right? It's just it's the way that my architecture actually works now, is that it's responsive. So that means it's pragmatic, it's fit for purpose. It's human-centered, which is really, you know, a key thing. It's business, it's engaged with the business. It's about nudging and coaching rather than telling and demanding things. it's about speaking architecture in the business's terms, which is often means you're not actually showing them architecture work. You're you're kind of describing them and you're solving their problems. So there's some real distinctions that are different, but I think there are also some commonalities. So things that are always true about architecture. We're still focused on mitigating IT risk and business capability, orchestration risks, like how things should be joined up. We're still helping people understand potential organizational impacts of their decisions. We've got this viewpoint of the whole organization from a kind of technology wiring stage and even business architecture point of view, and providing people access to that at the right time in the right way is still the job of the architect.
Great. We have so many people saying hi in the comments. I'm saying hi back to everyone. If I miss you, Chris, have a great comment here. Responsive, hopefully architecture at the speed of modern business. Sometimes feel like EAs are playing catch-ups. Yeah, try to catch up with the modern business right now. Luke is saying, I'm here to hear about the relationship between the architecture and the people that run it, the social technical side of the things as well. Guys, so hopefully we'll mention something here today as well. But before we get into it, just the next question, I guess, for the speakers. Obviously, a lot changes, everything changes really quickly. Over the past 10 years, been a lot of changes in technology and IT. And I'm curious, what has been the most significant change in enterprise architecture? And if you can provide specific examples of when this change happened for you, and how it impacted your approach. So something maybe click in your mind when you had this aha moment. We'll start with David this time.
Yeah. I think there was an aha moment, but it was more like the boiling of the frog aha moment. Like there was lots of different things that led up to this point where I was like, oh, I just suddenly kind of am seeing what is happening. And the thing that changed in architecture, I think, is not so much about what changed in architecture, but it's what changed in the environment that architecture deals with. So I was working, let me give the example, right? So I was working in another government agency in the digital health space. The one part of the agency had essentially been doing R&D on how to connect e-health software providers and healthcare providers like hospitals and so on. And the development teams were working almost like a skunk works, building, deploying, and testing things really quickly, and actually creating these really interesting APIs and platforms that could further this national e-health agenda. So what I realized our task was, so in one sense, it's like, oh my God, these developers are out of control. And on the other sense, I just sort of realized, actually, what's happened is now we've got cloud and people can just tap and create things as quickly as they like. We've got these new kind of API hosting platforms. We've got businesses who are creating their own and drawing down on technology. And so our task in the IT and architecture space was not to control how they were doing it, but how to enable them to develop and scale securely, to remove the unnecessary friction, to be able to pivot quickly. So it's this thing of where in their environment, technology and the access technology was kind of democratized, and the job of the architect then became to empower that in alignment with where the organization wants to go, and not stand in front of it. I think that was kind of the biggest thing that changed for me in architecture. That was the pivot between, okay, this is how I as an enterprise architect can be of service, and this is how enterprise architecture then becomes useful. I'm helping people understand the joined up picture.
Yeah, perfect. We'll just pass it on to Peter. Peter, did you have some sort of aha moment in your practice when you feel it became modern?
Yeah, I think over the last 10 years, probably the biggest change and switch for me was probably advances in capability-based planning, and then using customer lifecycle or journey service lens across the top. We're starting to see, and we certainly see capability as being at the heart of architecture, and being that Rosetta Stone that puts business context in business terms, that business can relate to, and from there it connects all the way through to all the layers of the underpinning architecture. So you don't just get the pretty pictures and the um, of service journeys, but you actually have a meaningful way of connecting, through the information and the people and the process and the applications and technology underneath. So um, that's really great. And so we've seen some organizations really get it. I mean, at one government agency, while we were doing some work there, we had the opportunity serendipitously to actually say, well, we've got 88 senior managers from across the state in a large forum, so why don't you come and facilitate the ideas generation? You've done these capability maps, and they can actually see themselves in it. So we got them for 3 or 4 hours in the morning to each around their tables, sit and reflect on issues and look at where their strengths and weaknesses are, and actually generate ideas using that, but with a completeness of view of what they actually do as a business, to take into their annual business planning cycle, which was really gratifying. And that was a big change, is actually business using what we give them meaningfully to reflect on strengths and weaknesses and what they use for what purpose, but in a way that's useful. And that was really great. To have them engaged and part of the business discussion, and to be able to prioritize, saying that, well, is it? I like to think of business capability as the muscle map of the business muscles of the organization. So where you've got the pain points, those are the muscles that are hurting. When you got the ones that are important to being, if you're a weightlifter or a runner, different muscles are important. And if you're weak at some and you need to be strong at them, then that gives that kind of gap. But then also, where are we spending the money? Are we spending money that's urgent and important? And that paradigm of lifting things up out of the technical into the useful and relevant is really good. We've also, for example, in higher education, started using archetypal life cycles across the capability model, because capability models are structural. They don't really tell you a story, but they just need to be that anatomy map of what we do. But being able to tell the story from, let's say, in a student's perspective, from when they become aware of wanting to study, to applying, to being a student, to being on campus, to all the way the other side, we can look at the orchestration of how those capabilities work together. And then you can add additional information to look at what information flows, which systems are in use, where are there pockets of things, what reports are in place. So it's a way to bring it alive, which we've used successfully in multiple industries. So that to me is maybe it's not technically new, but that was a big change in just how we do architecture.
Perfect. We have so many questions coming through, guys. So don't worry if we didn't answer your question. We'll try to take all the questions offline as well. But I will be picking some random questions from the audience and mixing up with my questions. We have a question from Kiev, actually. Is this what we call digital architecture, an evolution from what was a separate entity, they evolved from IT to an all-encompassing capabilities? David, what do you think?
I think digital architecture is encompassing what we're talking about. The digital architecture is kind of a slice through. This is my point of view, right? And architecture is mostly about opinion. So digital architecture is a slice through the organization. There are other slices through the organization in terms of infrastructure or service viewpoints. I think the speed of what we're talking about and the agility is absolutely has been driven by the availability and the development of digital technologies, absolutely. But I don't think what we're talking about is only about digital architecture. I'm not sure what you think, Pieter.
It's been a while since I've seen an analog architecture, to be honest. It's just become ubiquitous. And I mean, yeah, knowing how far away you are and what the key things are to enable a digital experience for the customers and for staff especially, I think is a key thing. But the enterprise itself, I think, being digital is we got to look at what that attack surface is, if you will, or just the exposure to the opportunities to be more digital, a bit more intelligent and informed as well.
Definitely. I guess next question will be from me. And guys, would love your comments on everything. You would love your comments on your view on the modern enterprise architecture, and also would love your comments. Where do you see your organization in the journey towards modern enterprise architecture practice? Like, how would you rate your organization from 1 to 10? I don't know, from analog to modern. So, and guys, so what in your kind of experience, what are the key benefits of adopting modern enterprise architecture in today's fast-paced business environment? You already start talking about a few examples, but maybe, can you sort of provide any specific example, recent specific examples in your practice? We'll start with Pieter this time.
Sure. I said, taking what we've sort of said as a contemporary approach, modern approach, I think we can really connect to what business deems important and focus on what's really important to them. So their outside-in approach helps the organization focus on their service offerings. So if it were a restaurant, what's on the menu in front of house, focus on that without getting bogged down to the complications of the back office, the stores, or the kitchen, or anything like that. Focus on that, get the big picture right, and then build it out. I think the other key benefit is if you take an evidence-based and a data-driven approach, it also gives confidence to the decision makers that you're giving advice to. So if it's data-driven, it should be given to decision makers as information, not data. Giving them just reams of stuff, and it feels overwhelming. You've got to tell it as simply as possible, but with the confidence that there's substance underneath. An example I could maybe give is in 2015, for a big government agency, we used those end-to-end business scenarios for typical customer journeys to look at the flow of information across the capability landscape and use it as a heat map for the more times in more of those journeys that a capability is there, the more relatively important it is. So when prioritizing uplift, those things that actually affect your customer experience or delivers those customer outcomes, were deemed relatively more important. So that really brought it to life, and they could see where some of those risks and bottlenecks are, and if they're weak in something that actually serves most of their critical customer journeys, then it probably makes sense to send that specific muscle to the gym, and not just give it a good rub. What we also did in that one is to use BI dashboards to actually slice and dice the heat maps for the results of all the surveys and then the pain points analysis across different areas, and can compare the issues and results. So it wasn't just a static model that produced in a piece of paper or just a wall chart or something, but it was actually useful to inform subsequent questions, or what about our area, and instead of just the whole rolled up thing. So I think that responsiveness and being able to ask emerging questions and not just have a cookie cutter that puts stuff in is definitely a key benefit to being a bit more evidence based and focus on what's important.
David, over to you. Any recent examples of the benefits that you've seen?
Yeah, and look, just to echo some of the stuff that Pieter said, look, that stuff about as simple as possible, but making sure that it's rigorous in terms of the response to the business. I think one of my provocations to architects is to say, no one cares about your architecture, which is to say people care that you've done it, but what they want is the answer. And the answer in a consumable form. So those Power BI dashboards that I've seen us producers like are perfect. Like the business kind of loves them. I think but to your actual question, Jana, the benefits. So a couple come to mind. One is around the increasing mandate for the EA team. It's kind of like a selfish benefit for the EA team. But the more you do architecture in this way, the more the business listens to you, and the more that your enterprise-wide view can become useful. And so you get this increasing level of mandate to contribute to more and more strategic things in the business. And it kind of points, it's kind of along the lines of what Christine was talking about in the chat about, doing more and more strategic architecture. So that's a kind of a feedback loop on that benefit. That the organization using more architecture to do things to deliver the right things is huge. I think the other benefits, we kind of talked a bit about them around being able to move at the speed of the business wants to and needs to. Not holding the business back. So there's a real problem with more traditional architecture being seen as bottlenecks for progress. So not being that bottleneck is a benefit. There are specific benefits around the behaviors of modern architects as opposed to traditional architects. So modern architects are more to be kind of a bit coarse about it. I mean, like blunt about it. Like have exhibit a higher emotional intelligence. They're more connected with people, more connected with what people want and need, and that connectivity and that rapport that you build with the business again feeds back on itself and is a benefit that amplifies the work that the architecture does. And all of this is kind of coming from I was thinking through an example. You asked for examples from a client. It was a multinational manufacturing organization that decided to transform all its corporate functions all at once and its digital customer-facing functions and unify that under a single global model, like super ambitious. They pulled it off, by the way. And at the same time, they created an enterprise architecture function. So they didn't have one at the global level. They realized they needed one, and so we were helping them with this dual function of like setting up the AI function whilst delivering for the transformation function. And by adopting this modern architecture stance, we were able to not only have the business start to listen to some of the strategic advice. We developed some viewpoints. They were absolutely not traditional architecture viewpoints. I remember one we did was essentially we mimicked the London tube map, like those train maps that show all the different stations and how they're all connected. And but actually it was about describing the different business capabilities that they needed in the business or they had in the business and how they're going to be connected by different value streams. And just having a different perspective on how to represent those kind of architectural elements really resonated, and then opened up a whole new line of communication with us and the transformation program. It was really super effective.
Thank you. I guess we already brought Christine's comment on the screen. Maybe bring Christine's question as well. Christine is saying modern architecture, in my opinion, is bringing together the outside-in view and aligning it with the inside-out view, so that business design always consider who the human customer is. How do we get the design thinking practitioners to work collaboratively with enterprise architect and business architect? David, would you like to answer that?
It's an awesome question, and once you find out, let me know. No, but I think so. The way that we approach this is to incorporate design thinking techniques into how we deliver architecture. So when we get to work with design, service designers and other design thinking practitioners, they can recognize themselves in the work that we do, and through these sort of empathy models and service journeys and so on. So that's kind of part of it from our experience. I know that also business architecture as a discipline is adopting more human-centered design viewpoints as well, like customer journeys and so on. So I think that there is some joining together. but there is a sense in which there's still some sense in which there's different worlds. Maybe we're talking about modern service design versus traditional service design. I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I think we definitely do design thinking, and I think understanding the real problem before you jump to solutions is actually, and doing so deliberately, is so crucial to what we do in enterprise architecture, and having a design thinking hat or a mindset really helps you stay in the room and making sure you solve the right problem. To work collaboratively, I mean, even things like blueprinting, where you look at what's front of house and back of house, but being able to take it not just notionally, but just in a structured way, probably through capabilities, what I would do, and the way we do it, is use that organizing concept rather than too much data points to look at grouping things underneath, rather than maybe a scattergun that sometimes is a little bit unstructured in some of the service blueprinting that I have seen done. But, you know, happy to have them on board, and it's really a good value add.
There you go. Perfect. Christine, well, you know, let us know your answer anyway in the comments. And next question, I guess I have a really similar question that we have from Francis. Sorry, guys, if I pronounce your names incorrectly. Apologies. The question is, what it will take for organization to tip from the high prevalence of sluggish enterprise archaeology to modern enterprise architecture that effectively sets direction, I guess. And so it's similar to my question as well. What challenges, you know, do organizations face then implementing a modern enterprise architecture? You know, how they overcome them? What sort of steps you need to take? And if you have some examples, that would be amazing. David, you know, how we go from archaeology to architecture?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think there's a couple of things that hold organizations back. I'm thinking there's a couple of examples I've got. One is, and it's under this heading of the enterprise architecture often has ended up being constrained inside a box by the organization, and the organization won't listen to them beyond certain very technical things. And so the architects don't get to express the more strategic architecture and provide that advice. I'm remembering one client I worked with in the UK, and their architecture team had been, over the courses of years, relegated to being librarians of technology information, and really just managing a repository of data constructs and applications and so on. And so they really, I mean, to take that muscle analogy that Pieter was using, they'd really kind of, their muscle of architecture really wasted away. And so when people came to them for actual, you know, real strategic advice, they weren't able to do it. So breaking that pattern, breaking the practice of architecture, and acknowledging that it's not working, or that it's in a too traditional sense, is really key. The other thing that holds people back is, I think I can't remember who it was, talked about the socio-technical kind of dynamic, which is, or one perspective on that is the people involved, and how those people are. Like we worked with a banking client whose in-house architects were either very technical people, so they'd come up through the technology layer and didn't quite have that kind of systems thinking, enterprise-wide thinking that's required of enterprise architecture, and also were very technology focused. And so they just didn't have this ability to interface with the business and talk about business problems and business challenges, and talk about this, you know, alignment to strategy and all those things that we needed to. So the challenge there was they were never going to be able to do that sort of architecture unless they kind of leveled up in their viewpoint about what architecture was and how to deliver it, and at the bottom line, being more curious about the people they're serving.
Definitely. Over to you, Pieter.
Look, I think a key challenge is to know the value you add, and to be able to articulate it. Another key thing is to be an enabler and not a constraint. You how do you see yourself as that? Can you put in lightweight governance? To just put guardrails up and a clear runway, rather than big roadblocks. I think from a people perspective, architects need to be able to position themselves properly. You don't want to be seen as policemen. Maybe, and it's a bit better to be seen as a lifeguard, but preferably maybe a coach. That you see before you start the journey and plan it, and and check in throughout the journey, and look for advice and like so. A lot of that is about perception and setting up those relationships and the perception. I spent some time in a startup, that was moving up to scale up and really successful. And what you got to understand is that there are lots of engineers and lots of creative people, all smart. Being smart, I'm sorry to say, David, is not unique to architects. And sometimes we forget that. That thinking and designing and stuff is not unique to architects. You got to get over yourself a little bit. So you need to understand where you can add value and where you just need to set that runway, and then get out of the way and let people get on with it, and not try and micromanage the minutiae of it. What we did manage to do is to help the organization going into scale up, getting to have the big boy pants on, is to create a framework to help ensure compliance and plan for GDPR, and be able to show the regulators that this is not just so fluid that there's no repeatability or substance to it. So understand where you can add value. Also planning to set up a new country and what you need, what capabilities you need, and how to do that, and how to inform planning, but certainly not to get in the way and suddenly want to micromanage and control and do the big upfront design to delay everything. I think you've got to adjust to that pace of the organization.
Yeah. So my next question is, let's imagine, the most ambitious and high-performing modern architecture team. Yeah. So what does a great success look like for the team like this? What's the ideal situation in the ideal world? Peter, like, how would you describe it?
I think the only advice I can really give is to be collaborative, and not feel that you're the smartest person in the room, because you're typically not. But if you try and be an architect that listens more than you talk, and when you listen to understand and not just to respond or to win the argument, that is crucial to and if everybody has that kind of attitude in your practice, then you have a better chance of success. So if you want to be that advisor and be the coach, you've got to have that kind of humility, and not have to win every argument. And I think another key thing that I would advise is you've got to embrace new knowledge and enablers. There's so much knowledge and so much stuff out there that we don't know anything about, So doing some research, and using your AI to help you with pre-planning things or validating things, and getting to learn a whole new industry when you walk into it for the first time, and being able to accelerate and do that, rather than say, well, send us your documents or send us your logs, and we will trawl through it. You've got to embrace some of these new things. They're a bit scary sometimes, but quite exciting. And they're not going to take your job away, but they certainly will accelerate. And it's a great opportunity to accelerate and be more effective. But yeah, I would say.
David, anything to add to this?
Listen.
Yeah, and before I do, I have to apologize. I'm a little bit distracted. My 5-month-old puppy is tearing up my apartment at the moment, which is I'm trying to stay focused at the same time and not crying about what's happening. I think what success looks like
Welcome to the stream.
to build on what Peter was saying. I think that, or to add to that, is what success looks like is having this sort of integrated approach with the other specialists who are providing strategic advice in the organization, and developing solutions in the organization. So, finding having a cadence of working where you're working with finance, where you're working with strategy, the strategy people, with and because we're all kind of trying to solve the same problem from different angles, with the EPMO. And I think someone put in the comments about, is this kind of merging with modern program portfolio management? It kind of is, but the point is we're all coming at it from different angles, and so that's part of it, is like having this being integrated across the organization around strategic planning and making sure you're kind of supporting each other in that. And the part B to that is also what Pieter pointed to is being in service of, like, architecture, enterprise architecture specifically. Doesn't actually create the value in the organization. We're enablers of that, and we're in service of the people who are doing that. And so understanding how you can be of service, and coming from that perspective is what a successful architecture function is going to be like. In terms of one of the key things, then there are some things that are going to be required for you to do that. Like, you need to be relevant, you need to, be connected, you need to be providing value. Even if you're working on something over time, you need to be, delivering value so that people still know you're there and still know you can produce stuff that they want.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of leads us to sort of the last part of our conversation, and to give a bit of advice to to people who want to progress in enterprise architecture and stay relevant. And there's definitely a few questions in the comments asking about the specific skills that people need to gain. And I've it's a lot of comments, guys. Like, I am superhuman, but I can't read them all on the go and manage a stream at the moment. But apologies if I miss some good questions there. But let's just answer a few regarding the skills. Daryl saying, what is your advice to architects who keep trying to explain TOGAF to their business stakeholders?
Don't. Is my advice. Sorry, Pieter.
I would say it's codified common sense, and it's the lingua franca. It's the data, not the information. So what is understand and align, and then work in a structured way to do stuff. But don't necessarily explain, we're in phase D now. So no, I wouldn't lead with the method, but so what are the method of business is more important, and aligning around that vision and stuff. Take the principles from it. Not the letter, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rob is asking what types of supporting soft skills are crucial for modern architecture: design thinking, HCD, risk management, storytelling. It seems the success of modern architecture is less about frameworks and technical skills, and more being able to provide trusted insights to the business. I guess, we're kind of like coming to that conclusion, and I would love you guys to sort of give your top advice. If you summarize a little bit what we discussed today, and you need to give your top advice to enterprise architects who wants to stay relevant and effective in their roles, what it would be. David, over to you.
Yeah, look, so I suppose there's some messages we've talked about today that are relevant, like being people focused, being listening for the problems in the business, and providing solutions or answers that are in the form that are consumable. Having done the architecture work, absolutely. I think there are some other sort of things that strike me about this question too, though, that we haven't necessarily brought up. One is the importance of staying in touch with current platforms and technologies, even if that's not what we do. If you're a conceptual architect, working at an enterprise strategic level, you need to understand what people are using, to have a sense of it, to know, to have an opinion about it. And to actually, you kind of also need to have an informed opinion about what's coming down the hype curve. As a strategic, advisor, essentially, people are going to be looking to you to have that. So, staying up to date on what's happening in the industry, absolutely super important. And the other one, it seems like a small thing, but I think it's a big thing, is that you need to be good at facilitating using current collaboration technologies. This is not necessarily about architecture, it's really about anything, but actually modern architecture happens in modern ways through modern channels. And if you stumble with Teams, if you stumble with Miro, if you aren't fluent with ChatGPT, then they'll notice that, right? So being good at the tools is super important. It always has been, but it's still super important.
Yeah, my frequent flyer status has certainly taken a dip since since the remote working and being able to be effective that way without needing to be on site. That certainly changed things. I think an interesting one about that previous question about it's not just the softer skills. You can't just have the soft skills. And I said, yes, you need to do good architecture, but you have to actually have some architecture behind the architecture. Otherwise, you're not going to save the regret cost later. You're not going to help people understand the impact. So probably back to the mantra of it needs to be good and right and successful. And I think the soft skills help it be successful. And it needs to be, you need to be good at the stuff that you're doing. And if you're working in an organization where you're using a repository, the finger of time can quickly set in where you have to reboot and restart, put a torch to your repository and start again if you don't have a custodian or a librarian kind of thing that curates it or apply the things. If you've got a high turnover of contract or project resources that that aren't delivering into it, then suddenly your baseline moves on before you've actually put that thing in, and understand that what you've got in your repository is there for you to accelerate the advice that you can give going forward. Your job is not to keep it so up to date minute by minute that you have 12 or 300 architects working on creating the digital twin in your architecture repository of what your actual organization does. So you've got to balance out the rigor and that you do with the pace you need to work on, and how much time you actually can afford to spend curating your knowledge base. It's important, absolutely, but it's not the only thing. So yeah, be good enough.
Ian have a comment for you, Peter. You don't have to win every argument. You can't understand architect at all. You don't have to win
I've lost
every
that
argument.
one again, Ian. Yeah, get over yourself, Ian.
There's definitely a few comments coming in about the puppies. So David, I think we found the star of the show there, hiding behind. Everyone saying, agree, David. People skills, Peter, so many comments. Thank you guys for your comments. And I guess just I'm cautious about the time. We definitely don't want to go over time today. Keeping it nice and to the point. Just I guess to finish our today's stream, guys, would you like to share some, just a personal advice, maybe just something, I'm putting you on the spot here, we didn't prepare that question. some personal advice, something inspirational, or maybe just like something, something you live by, and how you, something you follow not only in your practice but in your life. So if you leave our listeners with one advice in today's stream, what it would be? Just like a 30-second one.
The one I've lived by since I was about 18 is the more you worry about it, the worse it gets. So don't worry about it.
I love it. Or schedule some time to worry, and worry like on Friday at 5 p.m. So
just don't worry about it.
Just don't worry at all.
And don't get overwhelmed. The more you do, the more you can do. But you've got to learn to prioritize and procrastinate successfully. on the more things that aren't that much of a priority.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
What's
you,
your
Peter
Yana?
and David. Great discussion today. Thank you so much, everyone who join and comment. And if we miss some of your questions, we'll make sure we'll go back to the stream and answer it offline. You can catch up the replay as well. Our replay will be available on LinkedIn and YouTube. So don't worry if you miss some parts of the discussions. You can definitely catch it later. And obviously share with everyone who really need to hear this. And our next event is scheduled for the 3rd of October. So I lied a little bit. I told you that we're going to do monthly, but we're going to skip September. But I promise after September, we're going to do monthly. And our next event will be on the 3rd of October. And of course, it will be, about AI. We can't choose different topic. Yes, sir. The topic is, will AI enhance or replace enterprise architect? And you don't want to miss this one. And obviously, there's a few things you can do to get notified. Please join our meetup group. I just created a meetup group that's called Modern Enterprise Architecture. Of course, how original the name, but at least you can find it. And we have 3 different groups, one in Australia, one in New Zealand, and one in UK as well. So it depends where you're watching us from. Please join the appropriate group, because we plan to host some face-to-face events in the future. So make sure to join the group in your country. And of course, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, depending on what is your preferred platform for consuming information. And of course, if you are on the lookout for your next enterprise architecture role, please connect with me. Yes, Jana Martins. You can, see my name on the screen. Make sure to connect, say hi. I'm always happy to have a chat. And again, thank you so much for all your questions, comments. As I said, we'll make sure to go back to some of the comments offline. There's so many people saying thank you. Um, thank you. Thank you for advice. Great session. Thank you, everyone. And we really looking forward to see you in October. Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
David.
Yana.
And
Thanks,
thank you,
Yana.
Peter.